following program is from NET, the National Educational Television Network.
It was on this spot in 1858 that the last slave ship from Africa touched the North American continent. A century later, the vestiges of this inhumanity still remain, and our civilization continues to pay the price of emancipation. The fee has been paid over many times, but finally there is hope that the payments will decrease. The ancestors of these Negro slave singers had to swim ashore. Last summer, on this same beach, the Negro citizens of Brunswick went swimming. There were no demonstrations, no riots, no violence. Just up the coast in Savannah and to the south in Jacksonville, there were painful incidents. In Brunswick, NAACP members testing the civil rights law found, for the most part, peaceful compliance. But racial progress does not come without pressure.
And come the first of the year, our executive board and all of you will plan our agenda for the year, which will include jobs, which will include appointments on boards, better improvement in our city and appointments on boards and so forth. It will include everything that we are involved in this city, wherever our money is involved as taxpayers. This is what our agenda will consist of. And we will work that agenda diligently to try to reason together with those who are in power to come to some sensible agreement that will be satisfactory for the betterment and improvement of all the people in this our community.
The National Educational Television Network presents At Issue. From Brunswick, Georgia, Quiet Conflict. Brunswick, Georgia is situated in a marshy coastal area just above Florida. Lying in the heart of the Deep South's Black Belt, its problems have been similar to those of other cities where blacks and whites have been trying to find a new way of living together. What is different about Brunswick is that the conflict has been quiet so far. The gold water sweep that took the South in November passed through here too. And in a local election last month, Brunswick's NAACP leader, Julius Caesar Hope, lost to Reggie Holzendorf, a restaurant owner backed by the Citizens Council. So the questions to be asked about Brunswick are twofold. How was the quiet desegregation achieved? And will it last? Brunswick's population is 23,200. A little less than half are Negro. This has given the Brunswick Negro considerable economic leverage. Beyond this, there are two moderating economic factors: tourism and big industry. Vacationers from all parts of the country travel down Route 17, some bound for Florida, others for the nearby beaches of St. Simons, Jekyll, and Sea Islands, out beyond the marshes of Glen. In this same area are the factories, like Dixie Paint and Varnish, and farther out, the new Thiokol rocket fuel plant. Racial problems discourage both tourists and business. Even before the passage of the Civil Rights Act, most businesses, hotels, and lunch counters were serving Negroes. Glen Academy was one of the first schools in the South to be desegregated without court action instigated by Negroes. This year, 9 Negro children attend classes here. Most of the credit for peace and progress must go to the willingness of moderate men to take part in government and to reason together. Brunswick has had a biracial committee for years. Working behind the scenes, its members have felt that the best way to do things is simply to do them quietly and without publicity. The man most responsible for keeping the racial lines of communication open is City Manager Bruce Lovern. He talks with Robert Squire.
Mr. Lovern, Brunswick's had an unusually quiet history of race relations. You've had an active NAACP here, you've had an active Citizens Council. You've been the city manager for 8 years during this period. You're the man in the middle. How have you managed to get this kind of progress and calm in Brunswick?
The city manager is not entitled to the credit or responsibility for this progress. It rests with the people in the community who have established communications and maintained communications between the races. I think this pretty much sums up the ability of Brunswick to keep down racial problems.
What specific role have you had?
Certainly as city manager, my role was confined to carrying out the policies of the commission or the community as established by the city commission. And in doing so, we participate in determining these policies. We made a special trip to Albany, Georgia to study their problem, the manner in which they'd handle their racial problems in Brunswick, and came back and told our people that there seems to be two roads that lead to the same end. It's a question which road you'd rather choose, a communication between the races or a break off of communications and fail to talk and suffer the results therefrom. So our people very wisely, we think, chose the bargaining table which to resolve their racial problems.
What do you think the problem was in Albany?
Well, I think basically it's a problem of communication. There just seemed to be a definite lack of communication between the races and the leadership in the community. They did have communications of a sort, but it was through third parties, without directly across the table.
Now, in this natural conflict between racial integration and the status quo, the police play a very important part. What's been the role of your force in Brunswick?
Well, first of all, we think we have a very fine police department. Our police department in Brunswick has maintained an attitude of enforcing the laws that are on the statute books without regard to race or color of the man's skin, and treating every person as a human being. And I think this is really the secret of their success in Brunswick.
People say that Brunswick is divided between the come-heres and the been-heres, and being here takes a long time. Mrs. Georgia Gibbs has been here for 76 years. Her father was a stevedore, and she knew these docks when Brunswick was a thriving seaport. As a young college graduate, she helped to found the Brunswick NAACP, and she is still its treasurer. She talks with Lois Shaw.
Mrs. Gibbs, what was the feeling of white people toward Negroes when you were a girl?
When I was a girl, I considered the feeling a very good one. If Negroes had nothing to do but work, domestic work, I mean women. And if you were employed in a white family and you had illness in your home or any trouble, they would come to your rescue so that you had medicine, food, and a doctor. But in recent years, things grew different.
How different?
Well, it seems if strangers came into the community after our shipyard, and
When was that?
you mean the year it was in?
Well, around what time was that?
About 25 years ago. And of course it made a little difference. They didn't seem to care as much about each other and their welfare.
I see. Have there been any other changes in the attitude as the years have gone by?
Oh yes, the changes has come. Of course, Negro had more money and they could build better homes and they got cars, and they had better schools, and so everything grew better.
And do you think this has changed the attitude and created more respect for the Negro?
Has created more respect for the Negroes and a better attitude, and they are thought of in a better light.
How do you see that in your daily life?
Well, I see in daily life because of the way the people are treated. Years ago, anybody would have thought it was a terrible thing to call a Negro Mr. or Mrs. Now you get your bills from the stores and the city as Mr. or Mrs.
Has that been a recent development?
Yeah, that has been a recent development.
I see. Now, in the very early days of the NAACP here in Brunswick, what was your part in that?
I was a treasurer. I was elected treasurer when the organization was really founded.
And could you tell us about that time?
But the finding, well, just like most places, people have heard of people in the cities that were a little prosperous. And so when the NAACP opened their first office in Atlanta, they came to Brunswick as to see if we could build an organization here. And one night we had a meeting at the St. Paul Methodist Church, which now still exists, but remodeled. And that night we had around about 300 people coming to see what could be done for the Negroes.
And was there a speaker there, you mean?
There was a speaker there. I don't remember just who it was, but it was a speaker there from Atlanta.
Now, was that the very beginning? Was the NAACP
First time
organized?
we've ever had a meeting in the beginning of it. It was in October. I don't remember the date, but it was in October,
Now,
1929.
what happened in the ensuing years?
Everybody's going to get disinterested. But 6 or 7 of us kept it on, and we knew kept attending the meetings and things. And we knew if we didn't get somebody who could interest the people, that it would probably go down. And we asked Reverend Hope to come to our meeting, and when he came, because our president was a minister, and he had been called to another church in another city. And after a good bit of persuasion, he said he would be the president if a native, now I was, we call ourselves native, and he said, I lived here, and if I would go with him, he would go.
With the influence of Mrs. Gibbs, the Reverend Julius Caesar Hope became the leader of the NAACP in 1960. Having been active with Martin Luther King in the Montgomery bus boycott, he was well versed in the then new techniques of nonviolence. Although things had been quiet in Brunswick, much needed doing. At his campaign headquarters near the center of town, the Reverend Hope talks with Andrew Stern.
Reverend Hope, what were things like when you first came to this community more than 5 years ago?
Well, I can say I believe that the whites took silence for satisfaction. And that's about the way it was, and nobody actually had moved out to try to ask for those things that actually they deserved because of the taxes that they are involved with in this town. I believe that we should have representation along with taxation. Yes.
What was the Negro community like at that time?
Somewhat complacent, satisfied to a great extent. That's about where it was at that time.
So what did you do?
Actually, in becoming the head of the NAACP, we tried to look around to see actually what the town needed. Not the Negroes, what the town needed. And one day, so happened, the dentist had a convention on Jekyll. And in going to
Jekyll Island?
Jekyll Island, right. And we decided we'd go play a little golf. Reverend Mr. Holmes, Dr. Wilkes, and a couple others from Savannah and some other parts. So we went over to the golf course at high noon, and as soon as we got in there, they closed it down and said that they were watering it. And at that point, it began running through my mind that we needed some type of organization, some organization that would move forth, that when they said it was closed, we could remain there until it opened, until they tell us either we could use it or we couldn't use it. Now, if they told us we couldn't use it, then we had a court case. But if they didn't tell us anything, we just had to work with it until actually, we could get some breakthrough.
What happened after that?
After that, we started having mass meetings every Thursday night, and we've been having mass meetings ever since. We went into action, and actually, I began checking statistics from other areas that were involved in these demonstrations and the movement and what have you. And at that point, I tried to pick out the good and leave the bad. So we decided we'd use the procedure of writing letters to all areas of our government, whereas we thought we should have some advantage, some progress. I wrote to the City Commission, County Commissioners, Merchants Association, Chamber of Commerce, the chain stores, wrote to everybody that actually, where we thought we should get some consideration. And believe it or not, we received good response from city, county, merchants. A few was kind of slow in answering, but in a few days we were having conferences with city commission and county commission, Merchants Association, Chamber of Commerce, and so forth. And this is the way we actually moved.
What did you do with the people who were a little bit slow in responding?
They finally came in, so we didn't have to do anything, actually.
Well, were there any pickets or demonstrations or any violence at all in this town? How do you account for the fact that in Jacksonville and in Savannah there was a lot of action last summer and there was practically nothing at all here?
Well, I believe the whole situation depends on how you go about it. You see, actually in our letters, we did not demand anything at that time. We were asking for a conference that we might come together and reason together to try to work out these problems. And I believe in order to keep down friction, or violence, or what have you, is that you must have a meeting of mind. Maybe you do not go along with something all the way, but it's going to have to be some give and some take in order for us to move on as peaceful as possible. I believe other towns had a whole lot of problems because they did not go through any channels. They didn't have no means of communication. Maybe they didn't even try to find any means of communication. Maybe they just decided one night that they would go out the next day and sit in. But this is not the way to do it as far as I'm concerned. I believe that wherever you think that you should have some advantage, I think you should go to that person and try to have a conference, try to talk with the people involved, and try to work out something. Now, when you can't work it out after a period of time, make sure you do all you can to work it out. But after if you find out you just can't work it out, then you have to use the next best thing. And it so happened that we didn't have to come to that point until maybe about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like this. We had been involved with some stores, predominantly in Negro areas, living off of Negroes, had about 85% Negro patronage. We had talked to them about maybe 2 years, and they wouldn't do anything, wouldn't hire anybody. So one Friday, we decided we'd have to use some picket signs, and we used it for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And on the next Thursday, we got some action. So that was the first time we actually had to use it. The picket sign was peaceful picketing, no trouble, no problems.
And you haven't picketed that store again?
No, we haven't had. We've had good cooperation.
Well, now, in the November election, this town went for Senator Goldwater. And in the recent election, in which you ran for the town council, you were defeated by a very narrow margin. With all of this racial peace, how do you account for these votes? Is there an active element of the White Citizens Council? Is there really a backlash against what you've been doing?
No, I don't think it's a backlash. I think it's been here all the time, actually. And we must understand that the only things that we have gotten, they have not come easy. We had to push for them. They didn't just give them to us. And about this Goldwater situation here in this town, those people are here. I think that we have people here just like they are in Mississippi and everywhere else, actually. But the better thinking people want the town to continue to move in the right direction. So at crucial times, they usually come through with something substantial in order that we might keep the peace and harmony in the community.
Reverend Hope's opponent in the election was Reggie Holzendorf, owner of the Passport Club. When the Civil Rights Act was passed, Mr. Holzendorf chose to defy the spirit of the law. What was formerly the Salad Bowl, a public restaurant, became this private club. Although Mr. Holzendorf had originally agreed to participate in this program, at the last minute he decided to go hunting instead. In an earlier interview, Mr. Holzendorf said that what some people call racial progress is not progress at all. He felt that converting the Salad Bowl into a private club had not only given him the privilege of choosing his customers, but that the tone of exclusivity had attracted a better quality clientele. He was somewhat vague about his plans as a member of the City Commission, but he did say he'd like to see some improvement in the clamming industry. In his campaign, Mr. Holzendorf had the unqualified endorsement of Brunswick's Citizens Council. Vice President of the Council and a close advisor to Mr. Holzendorf is Bill Williams, who has the local franchise for Easy Living Homes.
Mr. Williams, you're the Vice President of the Glynn County Citizens Council. What's the purpose of this organization?
The same purpose that mankind has had since time began. And I believe that I can best answer it by giving you one of our application cards and not from a facetious standpoint, but sincerely inviting you to consider becoming a member. I think it would be good for you and good for the place you came from.
Would it be possible for you to capsulize for us some of the things that, the questions and answers on this card that give us an idea of your purposes and goals?
Yes, sir. We do not agree in any manner at all that our federal government is today a federal government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And we think that's wrong. And our goal is simply to return government to the people.
What's the relationship between the council here in Brunswick and the other white citizens councils around the South? Is there a relationship? Are you part of a general movement, or is this an independent organization?
To my knowledge, there is no such thing as a white citizens council. I do believe that some years ago, a Mr. Hargis, or this fellow from Tennessee, formed something called White Citizens Council down around Miami. I don't believe they even exist anymore, and if they do, certainly we have no connection with anything other than a national organization headquarters in Jackson, Mississippi.
How was this council formed, the one that is here in Brunswick?
I'd rather you'd ask why was it formed. The how simply gets to the mechanics of it, and I think it goes a little deeper than that. The Citizens Council came into being because of what we considered mistreatment by our governor of the Honorable George C. Wallace of Alabama. That was sort of the trigger. Actually, the causes are much deeper than that, of course. That was only the surface cause, the excuse, you might say. The Citizens Council in Glenn County came about because of dissatisfaction on the part of a majority of the population with the status quo. We simply don't agree that our government is conducting our affairs in the proper manner.
Now, on the local level, some of the officials of this town have called what's been going on between the races here a kind of progress in racial relations. How do you feel about this in the council? Do you feel this is good or bad, and if so, what are your reasons?
Well, even Webster, you know, provides us with synonyms and antonyms and this and that and the other, and you can place any interpretation you want on anything. No, I don't agree that it's good, and I don't believe that it could properly be called progress. I think it could more properly be called surrender or appeasement. I think it could even more properly be called evasion. I don't think they have faced squarely up to the issues.
Now, you're a citizen.
Either side.
You're a citizen and a businessman in Brunswick. Since you disagree with how things are going in terms of how they're run at the city level, and if you had your choice and could produce a kind of model pattern of racial relations in Brunswick, how would you organize it? What would you propose?
Well, of course, you're speaking now of utopia. Such a thing will never exist. But the ideal, from my standpoint, could best be termed evolution. Leave things to the natural course of events. I don't believe in compulsion, Mr. Squires. I don't believe in compulsion on my part, your part, or the third party's part. I don't think that we can live with compulsion. Human emotion is not something that you can grab and control and direct at your will. It's something that you live with, you adapt to, and you let it grow because of its surroundings. I don't believe that we have ever had any bad racial situation in Brunswick or in Glenn County. The ultra-liberal press will grab on to any sort of incident and play it up out of all proportion to make the entire area look like one great big hoodlum element. And this is simply not true. This is simply not true. Left to their own devices, I'm convinced that the colored people in Brunswick, or the entire country for that matter, and the white people, will work out a solution to their problems automatically, simply because they want to, simply because this is the nature of things. But when the federal government, or Bobby Kennedy, or any of his ilk, start to interfere and by compulsion try to control human emotion, this is simply contrary to everything that nature has decreed, and I don't think we can afford to try to live that way. It's one thing to have an automated society from a standpoint of manufacturing goods and masses of goods, but you don't run the human mind in that manner, much less the human heart.
Now, finally, you were a supporter of Mr. Holzendorf in the recent election for the city council.
Yes.
How do you think this, the election of Mr. Holzendorf by a 600-vote majority will affect matters involving relations between the races here, especially these matters as they come now before the city council?
Mr. Squires, I could talk all night and never get through telling you how I feel about that election. Certainly I was and am a supporter of Mr. Holzendorf. And some people professed surprise at the outcome of this election. Mr. Squires, it came as no surprise to me at all. It was planned that way. The election result was exactly what it should have been, and it was caused. It just didn't happen. Now, the result will be that for the first time in a number of years, anybody, not just a colored person, but anybody approaching the city council meeting with a complaint or a request or a petition or what have you will be able to receive a clear-cut, straight answer and action where it's necessary. No more evasion, Mr. Squire. No more beating around the bush. No more promises and broken promises. Now we get honest, personal integrity in every walk of our government at the city level.
You mentioned that the election was planned this way, that it wasn't an accident. This leads me to ask you, how is this done? What are the mechanics for planning it?
Organization and hard work by dedicated people who believe as we do.
A break in Brunswick's racial peace would be felt most severely by the many businessmen who rely on tourism. Al Perlmutter reports from Jekyll Island.
Tourism is vital to Brunswick. For years, the nearby beaches of St. Simons, Jekyll, and the Sea Islands have brought vacationers and money. They have served as a playground for the rich and have grown as a resort and tourist attraction. In the past, restaurants and hotels here have served only whites, and in some places, only white Gentiles. But there have been changes. Since the signing of the Civil Rights Bill in July, most rooms and restaurants have been open to all. Not everyone has seen fit to make use of these facilities, but when a Negro does register or enter a restaurant, there is no incident. The businessmen here on Jekyll Island are proud of their progress, but are reluctant to talk about it. Privately, they admit that the civil rights law for them has been a mixed blessing. Some whites who resent desegregation stay away, but new business is developing in the catering of conventions and parties for Negro organizations. In the background, there is talk that at some hotels, a middle ground will be reached, with some rooms set aside just for the whites and others assigned only for Negro use. It is here in the islands that the progress and conflict is most quiet. The businessmen feel their progress should continue without the stimulus of publicity.
The job of making sure that tourism and all other business continue to flourish in Brunswick falls on the mayor, Dr. Joe Mercer. Having served on the city commission for a year, just before his election last January, Mayor Mercer well knows the importance of racial peace to the well-being of the community. And now, with the memory of the bitter Hope Holzendorf campaign still fresh in people's minds, the job is even more delicate. Dr. Mercer, how has this campaign made your job more delicate?
Well, primarily by bringing out a lot of submerged issues, things that have been left unsaid for a long time and that were better left unsaid. This has gelled a lot of opinion. A lot of people who have been middle of the road now have gone either to the right or the left. You might say that in my middle of the road position, I have a few more people to the right and the left and a few less with me in the middle of the road. I'd also like to comment on the fact about the bitterness of the campaign. I think basically the city of Brunswick, the majority of the people in the city of Brunswick felt a good bit of concern for this campaign because they would have much preferred not to have had these candidates in the race. However, all efforts to keep from having these candidates in the race failed, and when it boiled down to having these two men, to choose from, no other choice to be made, then feeling was brought out that might never have been brought out had it not developed in this manner.
But isn't it possibly better for the long-run future of Brunswick to know exactly what these elements are and exactly what they believe?
No, I wouldn't say that, because in my opinion, most of these people are people who are sincerely and genuinely searching for a solution to the problems that we're faced with. Many of them really didn't know how they felt. They were searching for the right rather than to be joining into one group or another. They didn't care to be considered to the right or the left. They wanted to be middle of the road. And had they not had such an issue placed before them, they might have stayed. I'll say this, I still feel that a good percentage of these people will come back to the middle of the road, especially now that the campaign is over. I think that a lot of people are ready and willing to see what Mr. Holzendorf will do, what course he'll take. I think then his activity on City Commission will be what will decide the future.
Well, how do you think that the races will get along after this campaign? You've had a good history of racial peace. There's still a few problems ahead of you. For instance, the closing of the swimming pool. What's going to happen on this issue?
Well, our attitude on the swimming pools has been that as each thing developed, the officials, but not only the officials, the leadership of Brunswick tried to do everything, take it in stride according to what they felt to be right. It only follows that sooner or later something will come up that cannot be solved so easily. Our attitude has been, and as I have put it on many occasions, with God's big Atlantic swimming pool out there, we've opened the beaches. There's no segregation on the beaches, that rather than to run into, set the stage where people could not be easily controlled, the swimming pools were closed, and in my opinion, probably will stay closed until such time that it appears that they could be safely opened that would not jeopardize other far more important areas where human relations must be considered. I might say that, so far as I'm concerned, the swimming pools, whether they are segregated or integrated, is the least of our worries, and I'd much rather have them closed than to have to worry about the potential.
What is your personal philosophy towards integration?
You've asked me a question that's hard to state. I was born in Middle Georgia. I grew up, was educated totally within the state of Georgia, and I'm a Southerner and proud of it. I believe that I have the philosophy of the vast majority of Southerners. My philosophy is that there have been many wrongs that have been done that must be corrected. At the same time, we don't have to bow our heads in shame or have a sense of guilt at this. Instead, we should bend our energies toward correcting these things. At the same time, I am antagonistic to those forces who would say that we must do everything immediately. I've had people say to me, why, look now, the Supreme Court ruling has been 10 years and nothing's been done. My answer to that is, Jesus Christ lived 1965 years ago, and we're still searching for the brotherhood of man. I think this is an area that we need to be working in. So my philosophy is that we need to do things so far as government is concerned, treating all people alike. But because something is right doesn't mean that it can be done overnight. It must be done in an atmosphere that the majority of people will accept, and if you do it in any other way, any push is going to wind up creating problems, more problems than it solves.
Mayor Mercer's moderate gradualism has helped to keep the racial peace, but the power structure of Brunswick remains white. Efforts by the Negroes to enter this structure have failed, as evidenced by the Reverend Hope's recent defeat for a seat on the City Commission. But the Negroes are beginning to use their greatest weapon, economic leverage. This is the wedge which may force entry. A.M. Harris, Jr. is president of the First National Bank. He feels the pulse of Brunswick.
Mr. Harris, the population of Brunswick is 40% Negro. How important is the purchasing power of this Negro community?
I would think it is extremely important to the overall economy of our community.
Has this economic power been used?
Not in any major way. We've only really had one incidence of picket or boycott, and this was resolved on an amicable basis by negotiation with the parties involved. So that while it certainly is important, I don't think that either the Negro nor the white want to see it used to any degree which might cause disruption of relationships otherwise.
Could you tell us how that incident developed?
There was a disagreement between an independent grocer and members of the NAACP, wherein he, the grocer, was requested to employ a Negro for a specific classification of job, which the white merchant didn't feel he really needed. And this was solved, as I say, through negotiation, and the merchant himself was his own operator of his own cash register and wanted to continue to be. An incident of this kind, which is isolated, of course, can bring on some disagreement among the races, but so far, all these matters have been settled on an amicable basis.
Why do you think the Negro community has not used its economic powers more?
I don't believe they really want to. I think that the vast majority of the Negroes in this community want to have peaceful and amicable relationships with their white neighbors.
As a result of the Civil Rights Act, have you seen any changes in the structure of this community?
No, none that are noticeable. No effort has been made to, no strong effort has been made to make use of facilities that the doors just naturally open to the Negroes. I think this community itself is a little bit unusual, and I believe it's a law-abiding community which will comply with the terms of the Civil Rights Bill, whether all features of it are tasteful or not.
Is it easy for a Negro to get a good job in Brunswick?
It depends primarily upon the training of the Negro. The problem has not been one of lack of willingness to hire as much as a lack of training and a lack of ability to perform a given job. I think that with education and with training, that more and more doors will open to Negroes and that they will have better and better jobs.
Well, in regard to education, you are a member of the Brunswick Board of Education.
Yes.
What steps do you think can be taken to better prepare Negro students for good job opportunities after their graduation?
Well, at the present time, the same curriculum is taught in both schools, both the white schools and in the Negro schools. More and more of our Negro children are going on to college. In addition to this, probably the thing that would best help would be the establishment of a vocational school, which is being planned at this time. Land has been acquired, and certainly we hope within a year and a half we can have such a school in construction here. This, I think, will help them more than any other one thing.
What plans does Brunswick have for integration of the schools, and how are they going?
Well, first of all, we voluntarily integrated our schools. We integrated 2 years ago the 11th and 12th grades in the senior white high school. An effort was made by a group of white people to stop the integration. The federal courts ruled that the Board of Education had done properly in integrating the schools, and we are now operating under a voluntary plan, although with court direction, and the plan is to integrate 2 additional grades each year until the school system is fully integrated.
The professional world of both Mr. Harris and Mayor Mercer frequently touch the world of Dr. and Mrs. J.C. Wilkes. A native of Pennsylvania, he brought his family here 10 years ago and will soon be moving into this new home on Jekyll Island. Dr. Wilkes is the only Negro dentist in Brunswick. Dr. Wilkes, could you have built this home here 10 years ago?
Mr. Stern, I want to say yes, right off the bat, but I believe that in lieu of the circumstances as they exist today and as I feel about it today, I'm forced to say no because of many, many factors that have transpired. Aside from the financial picture, possibly the relationship as it existed at that time, I would say no, because the island at that time was undeveloped, to say the least, of Negroes residing on the island, although a portion of the island had been allocated for Negro development. But here again, thanks to that everything has turned out as it is, and this has been our dream to build on the island, on beautiful Jekyll Island, and I think that at this point that we're both pleased about it. I think that the community is pleased about it, not from the aspect of my living on this so-called Negro Inn, but just perhaps a reputable person living on the island who happens to be a Negro.
What changed the atmosphere that made it possible for you to move here?
I wish that that I could say here again, Mr. Stern, that the influence was directly one of congeniality, but I feel as though that it was not. My wife, of course, was the prime factor. But aside from that, I think that during our professional training, we all put little pieces together on statistics that we gather on chambers of commerce and here and there, schools, churches, and to say the least of the income medium of the community as it exists. But aside from that, there's also the factor of environment in terms of climate. And it just so happens that I liked this climate. And I think that, as the white man says, in any number of instances, he likes or he chooses a locale because of the climate. Why shouldn't I?
Have you ever thought of moving somewhere else? I'm sure you've had offers to go back north.
Yes, Mr. Stern, this has entered my mind early in my practice here in Brunswick. I was disillusioned. Perhaps I was upset, frustrated almost to the point. I can recall that I was all set to pack my family up and move. Thank goodness that I did not. But since then, my philosophy has changed. Since I've got to know the people in the community, and I think that the people in the community have learned to know me, things have turned out to be very, very nice. And I wouldn't want to leave now for anything.
You're an administrator of the federal and city housing projects, and also a very active member of the Brunswick Human Relations Council. Can you tell me how this council works and what contributions it's made to racial peace?
Yes, I think the Glen Council on Human Relations has contributed greatly toward the desegregation of the school, the lunch counters, recreation facilities in Glen County. At first, we were criticized for just being a tea and coffee sip group with cookies. But I think this was necessary in the very beginning to overcome the social barriers between the Negro and white in the community. The Negroes and whites, I think, was afforded an opportunity to sit down and talk. Our organization, the Glen Council on Human Relations, is the first completely integrated council in Glen County. There are two other biracial committees. One, the biracial committee set up by the local branch, and also the biracial committee of the Ministerial Alliance. But they composed of men. But the Council on Human Relations is composed of both men and women, Negro and white. So we are very, very proud to have a completely integrated group in Glen County.
Now, what kinds of things has this council done?
Well, as I said, we have assisted in the desegregation of the recreation facilities and schools and library here. And as I said, we have also integrated socially. Well, maybe that might be a bad word, socially, but we have been invited to the homes of white members of our council, and we have invited to our homes. We have entertained them at dinners, and we have been invited been invited by them to be entertained at their homes.
Has this caused any kind of a commotion in the town of Brunswick?
None that I have heard of.
Has it ever happened that you've invited some white people to your home and they've refused to come?
No, they have never refused. However, there was one incident when one of our members was very apologetic in that she was not able to invite us to her home because of her neighbors. But I told her to have no fear, that she was always invited to our home.
Well, now, as part of your work in the Housing Administration, you've been involved in the new Urban Renewal Project. And is there any possibility that this project will, in the end, cause more segregation than integration?
Yes, I'm very much concerned about the relocation of Negro families. The Negro families and the white families are moving out of the urban renewal areas. The white families are moving into white subdivisions, and Negroes are moving into all Negro subdivisions. Wondering if something could be done about it, and that both the Negroes and whites would be relocated in a community in the urban renewal area. If something isn't done about this soon, I'm afraid we will definitely have separate communities, all Negroes and all white.
Is this going to interfere with a lot of the good work that's been done here the last 4 or 5 years?
I think it definitely will, because in Glenn County we have been very, very thankful that Negroes and whites have been living side by side. Consequently, I think that has contributed to the good relations, as I said, of the Negroes and whites in Glenn County.
Now, this would also create a further problem in the world of education, where I think you have some very personal relations.
Very definitely. They are building a new Negro junior high school. And, well, I shouldn't say Negro junior high school. It is a junior high school. However, it will be in a Negro neighborhood. And I'm afraid it will, too, be an all-Negro high school, junior high school. Now, in the field of education, we feel a definite kindred spirit to this educational movement here, because our son was one of the students that integrated the Glenn Academy High School. Of course, this was an adjustment on our part and his part, because we have now a different perspective on this integration movement, because we are immediately involved. However, we do believe that the adjustment that our son has made in the school has made him a better boy and more adjusted, which I think will help him.
It's a long way from the Wilkes' new home on Jekyll Island to the 1880 home of Mrs. Ann Morris in the center of Old Brunswick. Her ancestors in this part of the country go back to the early 1700s. Everything that was and is the South was seen by this family, including the very real changes of recent years. Mrs. Morris is an active member of the Brunswick Human Relations Council, and last month became the godmother to the Wilkes' new baby.
How did you happen to become the godmother of the Wilkes baby?
Well, they just asked me, and I accepted with pleasure. The Wilkes and I have become quite good friends since we have both been members of the Human Relations Council, and so that's how it happened.
Does the Human Relations Council have a real value here, do you feel?
Yes, I think it does. Not perceptibly, really, but the main thing is in establishing lines of communication between the races. And there's never been anything like that before, not on an equal level between the white people and the Negro people. And I think it's been, well, it's a very small membership, but it has been valuable.
Do you feel that it's changed your views at all? Or have your views changed during your life here?
Well, I think the first time that I was conscious of this was when I went up to my daughter's graduation from Vassar in 1946, I believe it was. She was living in a cooperative house where the girls helped with the various chores around. And when I went up for the commencement, she warned me ahead of time and said, now, this Negro girl is a good friend of mine. I want you to be treat her just the same as the other girls. So I was careful to do that. And when we were introduced there and had a few little pleasantries, and then she wandered off and went into the drawing room and was strumming on the piano. And I went in and watched her and tried to make a little conversation with her. but she was very uncommunicative and seemed like she didn't want to have anything to say to me at all. And I had the feeling that she thought I was patronizing her, which I didn't mean to at all. But I think one can, in trying, white people trying, I think they can be too nice, really.
After generations of paternalism, most white Southerners still must learn to deal with the Negro as an equal. So too, the Southern Negro must learn his rights and the uses of power. Every Thursday night, the Reverend Hope conducts a mass meeting in his church.
After the election, we saw men crying, ladies, boys, and girls crying. Our hearts were broken, very sad. You had a right to be sad, for you fought a good fight. You know, it is always hard to lose something which you want so badly. And when you lose it, it just, you know, I don't have no business smiling when I lose. It's like the next day, I was downtown, and one of the white gentlemen said to me, he said, Reverend, says, if I was you last night, says, I would have told the newsman, or the radioman, the announcer, to wait until tomorrow morning before I would make a statement, because I could tell myself that you was a little upset. And I turned to him and says, you right, I was upset. These same people, actually, which we as Negroes spend our money and cause them to ride in Cadillac cars and fly in airplanes and have wall-to-wall carpets and televisions in every room. These same people whom we are keeping alive and have been keeping alive for all these years, spending our monies with them, these same people could not find the time to show good faith by voting for a Negro, not a Negro, but a qualified Negro who was trying to represent all the people. So actually, that's the reason I was a little upset, tell you the truth. Just because of that, I was a little upset. But this showed us one thing. You know, the gentleman told a story the other night. Says there was a frozen snake on the ground. A frozen snake on the ground. It was frozen almost to death. And this man walked by and he picked him up and he had compassion on him and he put him in his bosom. And the snake began to warm up. And after a while, after he had warmed and thawed up and got himself together and moved around within the bosom of the man, we found that the snake bit the man. Then he stuck his head out of the man's shirt and his coat and looked up at him and licked his tongue out at him. And the man says, "Oh, snake," says, "you know I was very kind to you. You was freezing to death and I saved your life. Why did you treat me so mean?" And the snake replied in so many words, using your imagination now. He says that, amen. The snake replied to him, says, "Now you knew I was a snake all the time. You knew what I'm talking about." Amen. Now, we have some good whites in this community, but you see, the majority of them here and everywhere else, we know what they've been doing all these years. So why fool ourselves? The only thing that we are going to have to do, and the only thing that we can do to win an election here in this day, is that we must put more Negroes on the books than white folks. But we're not trying to scare anyone. But from now on, what we are going to do, while we are building up this voters registration, what we are going to do, we are going to determine who go in City Hall and who come out of City Hall. I want you all to know, just because we lost the election, my heart wasn't broken. I've been losing and winning all my life. You see, I've been up and I've been down all of my life. You see, so it's no big thing for me to have dark days. See, my history and the history of my foreparents and your foreparents are days of darkness. of days when we worked for the white man all day for just a little pot liquor. You see what I'm saying? And we worked for a whole lot of other nothing. Living in shacks where it rained in the house and all this kind of thing, and we've been doing this all of our days. And tell you the truth, to a large extent, we're still in slavery. Because in a whole lot of places, even around here, we have some Negroes making 75 cents an hour. You see, that's just like pot liquor. Just like pot liquor. So we don't need to feel bad and sad. See, we used to this kind of thing. We used to being mistreated. But this is what we must understand. Just because we are mistreated and misused, and just because we are buked and scorned, we ourselves cannot move in that same category. See, just because a man hates you and you begin hating that man, then if you begin hating the man, you become just like the man. So what I'm trying to say, evil against evil cannot correct evil. But you must have evil over against love. And once you have evil over against love, love will always win out. You heard Joe saying, somebody says that truth crushed to the ground will rise again. You can't keep that which is good down. You can't keep love down to save your life. You can't keep right down to save your life. And I want to tell you this one thing. One day, and it won't be long, we will have a city commissioner on the city commission here in Brunswick, Georgia.
It will probably be some time before the Reverend Hope or any other Negro is elected to the city commission. But the people of Brunswick, Georgia are slowly resolving their quiet conflict. Their progress toward integration, while not spectacular, has been achieved with a rare degree of dignity. And dignity in racial matters has been rather scarce in the South during the last decade. Men like City Manager Bruce Lovern or Mayor Joe Mercer may not like integration, but their commitment to reason has prevailed thus far. Men like Bill Williams or Reggie Holzendorf have a commitment to the past. The last bitter efforts of such men could still touch off acts of violence. But the fact that Reggie Holzendorf defeated the Reverend Hope for a seat on the city commission does not mean that Brunswick citizens want the Citizens Council. Many Brunswick politicians felt that a white moderate would have won the election without trouble. The white moderates will no doubt continue to make the major decisions. They have faced a real conflict and acted with wisdom, if not passion. Robert Penn Warren has written, "If the South is really able to face up to itself and its situation, it may achieve identity, moral identity. Then, in a country where moral identity is hard to come by, the South, because it has had to deal concretely with a moral problem, may offer some moral leadership. Brunswick, Georgia is headed in the right direction."
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.